Great. So thank you for joining this webinar. This is for the merchandising operations at Excella. And in this webinar, we are going to be talking about creating world-class content. And some of the things that are important out there are the holistic integration of people, process, and technology. So we'll be taking a look at the entire journey together over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. I'll be your host and presenter for today. My name is Nizamuddin Amir, and I'm the president and global head of the operations business at Excella. A brief background about myself. I was heading operations for Thomson Reuters in India, and previously co-located locations for our only GBPO. I have more than 20 years of work experience, primarily in the strategy and operations domain. And I'm a certified Lean Six Sigma now, Six Sigma black belt. So very quickly, in terms of the agenda, we will take a look at content operations, what it involves. We will be looking at certain best practices that are required to create world-class content. And at the end of it, I'd be happy to take some questions. In the first segment, we will be looking at content operations and start off with an overview of merchandising operations, what is it all about, and a quick look at the content creation journey. And then we'll be looking at some real-life quantified numbers as to where the retail space stands as of today. Merchandising operations are a set of processes which cover all aspects of the consumer's pre-purchase experience. So when we say pre-purchase experience, what is it all about? It is about findability of the product, the content, the product assortment, the prices, etc., which helps the consumer make a decision whether or not they should be buying that particular product. So in this particular slide, we are looking at four primary segments, and the foremost amongst that is item management. What is item management here? So item management, when you start off from ground zero, it has to start off with taxonomy, creating a taxonomy, right? So taxonomy here refers to the structure of categories and classes. If I break that down, what would be a category? What would be an example of a category? A category out here could be fashion, right? And a class or classes under the main category of fashion could be shirts, t-shirts, trousers, jeans. Alternatively, examples of classes could be men, women, children, etc. And these classes and categories are determined by guidelines that are specific to marketplaces, right? The second part of taxonomy also deals with the depth of attributes. Now, why do we define all of this right in the beginning when we are creating the taxonomy structure? It influences both the findability and the buyability of the product. So once a taxonomy is in place, the second thing that comes to the foreground is, of course, content creation. So which means creating the entire content journey, which we'll look at in depth and detail over the next couple of slides. But a quick overview, it starts off with the titles, descriptions, the attributes, etc., the images that are required to present the catalog effectively on the online space. Once we have the content created, QC'd, checked for accuracy, it is then published either internally to the marketplace team or pushed directly using a digital asset management tool, which is also, DAM is an acronym for that. Once the items have been onboarded with the taxonomy in place, we look at some kind of process improvement, right? So they could be taxonomy optimization. This could be driven by global trends. It could be driven by marketplace change in guidelines or changes in their structure, what your content strategy should be, and how your content can be optimized further. So when we talk about content optimization, it could also refer to enrichment of existing products, as existing items or existing SKUs, right? So which means that there could be a situation where you would start off with a mandatory set of attributes, because speed to market is the key out here. So once that is in place, the SEO chances for that particular product increase. At a later time, you might want to add more attributes to increase the SEO values, to increase the findability of the product, which finally culminates into a higher purchase of that particular product. To get all of this in place, it is very important to keep an optimized cycle, right? So which means from the time that the SKU comes in from the seller to the content enrichment, that is the item management piece, to the whole QC, to the supply chain, logistics, everything that goes, while the product is getting activated, to keep that entire from seller to activation time frame optimized, it is very important to keep that entire cycle lean. So which means that a portion of this can be automated, and good product always speaks well when it is backed by great quality, and hence the need for intelligent content QA. So today the e-commerce marketplace has evolved multifold. Earlier, it used to be a 100% check. It used to be a maker checker where every SKU was checked in depth and detail, line by line, for each and every line item. Then it moved on to a place where Six Sigma based sampling based on a quality assurance methodology was brought in, and then finally culminating to what is in vogue today, which means big data backed by machine learning and with a cover of artificial intelligence on it. So which means that rule-based content engines, quality engines are the rule of the day, right? So we'll take a quick look at that today as well. And then, of course, the fourth part of merchandising operations is competitive intelligence. When we say price monitoring, how are our products based on our marketplace faring with the competition? What is the assortment of products that are provided by the competition vis-a-vis what we are showcasing? How is our content benchmarked, and what is the gap that we have in terms of depth of attributes for that particular product? So with this overview, we will quickly move to the content creation journey of a new product. The new product starts off from the brand or the manufacturer website, right? So the manufacturer would have all the details regarding that particular product. And in an ideal situation, we assume that the manufacturer or the brand has everything that is required to get a SKU or a product activated, and that funnels through the distributor or the seller to the e-retailer, right? So which means that the e-retailer now is tasked with compiling the raw information that he has received from the seller, and the seller who in turn received it from the brand and from the manufacturer. Now the e-retailer, to increase the findability and the saleability of the particular product, would look at one, completing the catalog, and might also bring in attributes like photo shooting new images, creating marketing trails, promotions, etc., online promotions, discounts, to increase the viability of that product. And so what the e-retailer does is it sends the raw information that has been received from the brand or the manufacturer to the content creation team in-house. And in some cases, it is outsourced to content specialists like Ixala, right? So the next step to that would be the content creation team. So what does the content creation team do here? First, they would look at standardizing the data as per the templates or the NIS, different words that are used, terminology that is used, try to standardize all of that into the templates that are required, which needs to be populated with the minimum mandatory attributes that are required to onboard that particular SKU. So the next step, logical step, would be to source the missing attributes. Now, where can we source the missing attributes from? So we go back to step one, where you would look up the manufacturer website or the brand website to see what content is already available, and you pull that in. If that is not available, the second step would be to look at trusted third-party websites or competitor websites which have the same product. right? So if at this point, I would like to take a quick pause, because if you are pulling off straight from competitor websites, it has a direct impact on the SEO for your product, your search engine optimization chances for your particular product. So writing descriptions, curating the content, writing proper descriptions and marketing copy is very important. At the same time, with the compliance requirements for uses of images, etc. A lot of the images have to be created, again, maybe via a photo shoot, or it could be enhanced using 3D technology, 2D technology, Photoshop, 3D Studio Max, using products like Maya to build real case images, and then bringing those images under a particular standard which is necessary for the product to be placed on the catalog. So once the content has been curated, pulled together, the final step out here is publishing the content, which means using the digital asset management tool that is available to the marketplace or to the provider to push those completed products live on the marketplace. So till this stage, we have taken a quick look at two things. Overview of what merchandising operations is from an e-commerce perspective, and secondly, the content journey for a new product. So now let us assume that the product is out there on the marketplace. The second logical step would be to keep the product fresh, which means, just like you would go into LinkedIn and update your profile periodically to enhance it with new skill sets that you have gathered along the way, it is also important to refresh and keep your product content alive and updated. So this could be based on certain new information that has come in from the brand or the websites, right? Or it could be that to meet a particular seasonal peak, for example, a Black Friday sale, or a Halloween sale, or a White Friday sale, or Christmas, right? So you would want to push your products with the minimum attributes. So those are good enough to get the products up there on the marketplace. But to increase and keep this product alive over a longer period of time, they have to be enriched with additional information, which means additional attributes, which increase the findability of the product. So now if I, as a layman, if I go into Google and if I search for a product, a mobile phone, maybe an iPhone X, I would go search for it, and the website or the marketplace with the most unique content and with the best enriched attributed product would have the first ranking, right? So it is important to keep our content fresh, SEO optimized, and that's why even post situations where products have been onboarded, to keep it fresh and updated is important to increase the lifetime as well as the viability of the product. So with this background with us, there are certain challenges and pitfalls at different steps of the journey. When it comes to data sources, there could be products where the attributes or the content may not be clearly available with the manufacturer or the brand, right? So which means that those products are also not available online. These could be fresh releases, right? So there is a difficulty in identifying the exact product. Typically, you would go and identify a product using the model number or a UAN or a barcode. But if these are not available, then the content journey at its very start faces a huge hiccup to get off the ground. Next, at the distributor and the e-retailer stage, they are the ones who are actually getting the content, the raw data pushed to them from the manufacturers or the brand. And at times they are faced with poor quality of data, poor quality of images, inaccurate information, wrongly categorized information. So that is a hurdle that is faced at the e-retailer or the distributor stage. Now the content creation team gets its feed from the distributor or the seller or the e-retailer, right? So they are faced with problems now which have crept in through the system, which means they have to create catalogs in standardized templates. For that, they require the raw information. They have to make sure that the raw information is plugged in the correct way in the standardized templates, which are also offline replications of the taxonomy structure for the marketplace, right? So again, typical challenges are around product titles. Typically, different marketplaces have different nomenclatures that they would use to increase the uniqueness of the titles, and this is very important from the SEO perspective as well. The data accuracy again is a crept-in challenge, whether the data is accurate or not. Sourcing in images which are optimal for the product to be there. For example, in the electronics category, you would see a minimum of about 4 to 5 images that are associated with every product, and that is more or less an industry standard, right? So sourcing all the images and again getting the right kind of angle. So which means that when an online prospective buyer is there at the marketplace, he should be able to get a field which is close enough to a brick and mortar field, which means just like visiting your local store. So which means that the online imagery and the information, the descriptions of the product which are available should be enough or true to the fact that the person gets the understanding and the confidence to go ahead and complete the purchase. And then again, once all of this is done, the final hurdle typically comes to the point where you're trying to upload the completed catalogs to the marketplace. So uploads are rejected due to incorrect templates or missing data. So validations between the upload to the validations which are there at the data asset management backend tier, which validates or invalidates certain data types which prevent it from upload. So these are certain challenges and pitfalls that we identify or that we are aware of in the content journey so far. So at Excel, we upload a lot of SKUs. We create a lot of content, and these run into several million per annum, right? And we have had the opportunity of working with quite a few top e-retailers through the course of our journey in this space. And annually, we conduct a content audit and we try to benchmark the top 100 internet retailers. And these are typically drawn in from the IRCE 1000 list. And what do we look for? We look for the quality of the descriptions, that is the copywritings, the reviews and QAs which are there on the e-retail sites, the depth and quality of the cataloging, as well as the images. And for 2018, in a recent audit that was conducted last month, in October of 2018, November of 2018, we had some very interesting findings. So which means that of all retailers audited, 7.3% of total catalogs online had copy which was missing. So which means these are products which did not have a written description. Again, where descriptions or copy was available, 26.2% had plagiarized content. So which means when your content is plagiarized, other than typical legal and compliance challenges that can crop up, they also drastically reduce the viability and the findability of your product, which also leads to lower viability and hence lesser revenue for the marketplace. Interestingly, about 11% of catalogs had 100% copy that was plagiarized. Next part had to do with the taxonomy. So we found that about 27.2% had the items or the SKUs which were incorrectly categorized. The standard norm, mostly if you look at fashion, if you look at books, if you look at electronics, is about 4 images per product at a minimum, right? A 4 and anything beyond 4 is always a good stat to have. 23.9% of catalogs had only 1 image associated with a product. Again, these images have to be consistent, right? Because at the end of the day, the look and feel of the catalog page and the optimized imagery also has an impact on the viability from an end consumer perspective. So we found that 12% had incorrect image size. There was a lot of clutter, background noise in images. 20% had non-white backgrounds, which is a preferred background, almost an unwritten heuristic or a standard for the industry. Uh, the last two parts have to do with reviews and Q&A, right? So when you have verified buyers going and reviewing the content, the particular product, uh, their reviews actually provide the confidence to new prospective buyers as to their decision making, whether that is to be bought or that should not be bought or should be just left there. We found that 52% had no reviews, which again drastically reduces the viability of the product. Q&A again is a trend that has evolved over the last 2 to 5 years, right? So questions and answers, the questions asked about the particular product. For example, went and I was looking for a tennis racket bag on a premium website. Now, while the bag was there, I was not very sure whether it would fit in 1 tennis racket, 2 tennis rackets, or 5 tennis rackets. I was very lucky to find the Q&A on the website, which told me that it had a capacity of 5 rackets, and that was more than what I required, and hence my decision to buy that product was a lot quicker. So again, surprisingly, 86% of online catalogs lack Q&A today. So these are real life content observations that we have. And to have a great catalog online, certain best practices are required to bring everything together so that all of these issues or challenges are addressed during the content journey. So we have talked about the observations for enterprise retailers, has to do with plagiarisms, the SKUs currently not being very customer friendly, which means lacking Q&A and reviews and the number of images. These are the top deterrents to the viability of a product. So in the second segment of this webinar, we will look at how do we create world-class content, what are the best practices. So we will take a look at a linear world-class content framework. We will talk about the 3 main components that come together, the holistic marriage of people, process, and technology that make this journey optimal, how we draw in from best practices. For example, Six Sigma, how do we look at increasing resource knowledge, people working on these catalogs, how do we get them to perform optimally, how do we reduce the onboarding time of new resources to build large world-class teams, how do we bring all of that together, how do we gather all the data together to analyze and to report, and finally present using a platform such as Power BI, and of course the need for QA automation. So this is going to be a very interesting segment and an area of my interest. So when we talked about the backdrop of the whole content journey, this is where it starts. It starts with the sellers. So the sellers provide the product images, UPC codes, model numbers, etc. These are pushed to the e-retailers, or the e-retailers pull it from the sellers to get the raw data that is required to begin creating the catalog. Now, once that is come in, that is to be plugged in, on a template which is consistent with the taxonomy guidelines for the marketplace. And that is when the real cataloging work starts. So which means categorization as per the data standards, writing unique product descriptions, getting the product details and titles as per the marketplace guidelines, ensuring that the minimum number of images required for that particular category as per the marketplace guidelines are in order, and of course editing, optimizing, resizing images to make them pixel perfect and meet the requirements of online standards. So once all of this is created, the first cut of the catalog is put in place. It has to pass through a quality layer. And again, there are different ways of looking at quality here. Six Sigma methodology and tools that we will talk about in a subsequent slide is a good addition that has come into the fray in the last few years. Once the quality check is done, there is a quality assurance layer that is built on top of the quality check. And again, that is where newer technologies like big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, rule-based quality assurance comes into the picture. Once all of that is done and the quality assurance standards internally are met, the product is then uploaded using a data asset management tool for activation on the marketplace. So where does the catalog journey really start, right? So it starts with people, right? So people are there in place to start working on that particular catalog. And of course, there is a point where everybody starts. So it could be introducing a brand new person onto a process which deals with cataloging, or it could be training an existing resource on new categories or new specializations required to meet the cataloging requirements. So again, while we train and we certify, what is a mechanism? What is the whole training journey? How are people assessed for their knowledge? So which means a person gets trained, he goes through a particular assessment. If he clears it, then he is put into what you would call a live production in a controlled environment, which means that is where it draws in from TQM or where it draws in from Six Sigma. We talk about cells. So which means a cell out here is a composition of people in a team. A simplistic example, it could be a pentagon, 5 people in a cell, which would have 2 catalogers, 1 image editor, 1 quality person, and maybe a team lead or a subject matter expert, right? So how do cells work together? So which means easy discussions, transfer of knowledge, clarification of doubts as and when they arrive, within the cell. Now, cells again lead to the next part, which is almost like a blockchain framework. So how do different cells combine together, and holistically the team is functioning in unison with a good level of shared expertise in the right direction that is warranted to ensure great content at the end of the journey, right? So with all of that, we also understand that there are different guidelines which keep coming, which are updated. Marketplaces have to be competitive, so which means that as and when new guidelines, etc., or data is pushed by the brand or the manufacturer, it is important to update the marketplace guidelines, which the content team needs to be following. So which means that the knowledge management piece out here becomes very important, right? So how do we keep version control of the guidelines that have come in, ensuring that those guidelines are implemented from the date starting which they are to be implemented, and how that knowledge is shared within the performing team. Now, at the end of the people part, the bucket, of course, is reward and recognition. So which means how are you evaluating performance to determine who's meeting expectations, who's exceeding expectations, who's not meeting expectations, and how do you reward and recognize people. So again, retention of people is also very important in the content journey, because with time comes expertise, and with expertise comes great quality and efficiency. The second part, the second bucket of this journey is the process side. So which means that, when you are starting a new cataloging team or a new cataloging shop, what is the kind of transition methodology or the project management methodology that you would use? So when we talk about this, every cycle of batches is actually like a project, right? It could be for a particular event, maybe for a big sale on Christmas. It could be a 3-month project, or it could be an ongoing thing that goes through the span of the year. There are several recognized methodologies out there. There is Prince2, which is widely popular in the European regions. There is the Project Management Institute in the US, which has guidelines of project management, which are contained in what they call the Project Management Body of Knowledge. The acronym for that is PMBOK. It is the decision of the performing organization to adopt a methodology which works best with their particular requirements. At Excella, for example, we follow the PMI-defined methodology, which looks at the whole 9 areas of knowledge management in a product, which start with scope management. As scope changes, how do you manage it? Risk management, quality management, time management, resource management, communications management. And again, when we're talking about communications, a great part of project success is communication. So the Project Management Institute actually says that there is a heuristic that 80% of projects fail because of poor communication. Now, Six Sigma evolved, came into vogue with manufacturing, made popular, perfected to the core by the likes of Motorola, GE, Toyota, Xerox. So these companies adopted Six Sigma. What is Six Sigma? It is a methodology again, right? Which talks about continuous improvement. So how do you look at data within the framework of a process to analyze that data and to keep bettering yourself? So the whole concept of Kaizen, Pokayoke, etc., are very important. And these had been adopted and implemented very well in the manufacturing space through the late mid-70s, 80s, 90s. Jack Welch at GE was a great champion for Six Sigma, right? And e-commerce industry, interestingly, like any other service industry, has brought in the best practices that were required from Six Sigma and from Lean Six Sigma. So it is very important to have a Six Sigma domain, that culture of continuous improvement within performing organizations, because competition is evolving and you have to be ahead of the curve. So Six Sigma driven platform for metric-based continuous improvement initiatives is a point that I want to highlight here, because Six Sigma is data-driven. Six Sigma has 7 QC tools. Now, which are the ones which are most applicable? That is where a mature organization comes in, cherry picks the right tools required to deliver the success that it seeks to achieve. So this is now from a catalog creation perspective. How do we ensure that our catalog quality is optimal? But if we look at it from the end buyer perspective, or maybe from a marketplace perspective, so let us take an example of Ixola as an e-commerce service provider and XYZ as a top marketplace. The client of Ixola XYZ in this example is most interested in receiving content which exceeds the service level agreements in terms of quality, in terms of the actual handling time for a particular SKU, and the TAT, right? So what the end client does not want to see is a lot of variation. It is not okay in today's world of perfection and competition to deliver 99% quality on day one and deliver 90% on day 2 and then come back to 95 and 94. So which means that process variation needs to be data driven, monitored, and used to ensure that process variations are within acceptable bands. And again, that is where control charts come in, and control limits are defined to measure process maturity. Now, when we have the people who are trained and qualified to create world-class content within a defined framework, processes which are mature and optimized to ensure that quality and the speed to market is in place, the differentiator here comes with technology. So how do you optimally use technology to perform quality audits? How do you use technology to reduce the cycle time or the production time for a SKU? How do you reconcile and have automated checks coming in for your catalog? What is the PIM-DAM solution, product information management, or the data asset management solution that you have in place? How dynamic, how flexible is your solution to be quickly tweaked to meet the fast evolving, changing requirements of the e-commerce industry today? So which means your choice of technology, the flexibility and the adaptability and the quick implementation of your technology is a key factor in today's e-commerce marketplace success. So again, the three basic buckets out here are people, process, and technology. And all of these three need to work in tandem, in unison, and need to be holistically, they need to be married so they function as one particular block. So here's an example of SKU processing, quality check, and training integration. So the SKU has been created. Now it comes to the quality check stage of the journey, right? And this could be a manual process. You have a CTQ checklist. What is a CTQ checklist? Which means a critical to quality checklist. For example, if you upload a catalog for a particular product which has missing pricing information, or you're uploading a home product, or maybe you're uploading a furniture which does not have the dimensions on it, right? Or if, for example, if you are uploading a circular coffee table, which would have a diameter, but the dimensions are for length, breadth, and height. Right? So these are things which nobody would want to buy online, right? So a CTQ checklist is typically created by the performing organization in conversation with the marketplace experts to ensure that what is required for that product to be perfect online is covered during the quality checks. Now, in earlier days, it used to be 100% maker checker kind of a quality check. Let me move away from e-commerce and give you an example of a maker checker scenario. So let's assume that Joe walks to the bank and he would like to withdraw $100 from the bank. So he writes out a self-check to himself. So in his check leaf, he would write the amount in words, in numbers. He would put a date to it. He may or may not put, he would not put an account pay out there, but he would write self-pay, self. He would sign it as a signature at the bottom of the check leaf, and he would present it to the teller. And the teller, as you would have seen in a bank, would draw out his green or red pen and start putting text. Okay, you know what? He has put in his name. He has put in the amount in dollars, in numbers. He has now written it in words. His signature matches. His date is proper, and he approves that check for payment to Joe. So which means that everything that Joe did was checked, right? So that is a 100% check. That's also called a maker checker in typical quality terminology. Now, where a performing organization in the e-commerce space today is doing about 1 million SKUs a month, how do you do 100% maker checker kind of a process? Is it optimal? Is it feasible? Absolutely not. So which means that to meet quality standards, today the industry standards are anything between 97 to 99%, 95 to 99% for most categories, right? For them to have online success. Is it possible to go and do a 100% check? No, it isn't. So what do? You use Six Sigma, where you define the quality assurance level. This is statistically drawn based on that, based on the population. You identify the number of SKUs that need to be checked. The SKUs need to be drawn up at random using a tool, a randomizer tool, so that the entire length and breadth of the population is actually covered, and the SKUs for which you are checking for quality is representative of the representative of the entire population. So you use a Six Sigma calculator out there. Now, with that in place, once you have done the quality, you would come up with a quality report. So which means that what would the quality report contain? It would contain maybe categories where you've made most of the errors, or it could be people who have committed most of the errors. It could be people who have committed X number of errors in which category. So which means how do you tie in category level errors versus people errors, and how do you correlate both category and people level errors out there. So there you come up and you use one of the Six Sigma tools, Pareto, which I'll again talk in detail in a coming up slide. We use a Pareto analysis, and then you look for errors at a category level, at a resource level. If the quality report is good, you deliver the SKU. If the quality is not optimal, so you now know that, you know what, at a category level, this is where most of my errors are. So these categories, people working on these categories require focused training, or if it are these resources who are creating most of the errors, and these resources need to be isolated and introduced into focused training so that the error levels come down, right? So that is how training assessment becomes a part. And again, where SKUs have no quality issues, they are delivered straight to be activated. Where they have quality issues, they are brought in for rework. And for a performing organization of leveled maturity, it is important to keep rework down to minimal, because that effort goes straight down, affecting the EBITDA of the performing organization. So moving ahead, we have actually talked about this. What I wanted to highlight out here is the sampling calculator. So you would have a population standard deviation. So you would put this is basically the construct. This is the ribcage of the whole sampling methodology. You have a population, you look at the standard deviation, you put in a particular number for it, you define the tolerance limit. I know this is a bit technical, but again, you're defining a tolerance limit. Both sides of the mean out here refers to the average. And what is the representation error? So if you're looking at 95% quality, then your representation error should not exceed 5%. And what is the projected sample size from the population? So you would now use that to identify the number of SKUs. Today, it is very important to establish a Six Sigma DNA, because Six Sigma projects by themselves are great. They bring great value at the end of culmination, but they also take a lot of time. And as we are moving on a fast-tracked journey of continuous improvement, the DNA is important. So which means the performing teams need to understand the correct Six Sigma tools like 5Y, like Pareto, like control charts, and how to read them, how to implement them, how to analyze the results, and how to drive short, agile sprints of continuous improvement. Again, once you have this in place the first time right, which means that the quality or at the production level needs to be optimal and expectedly to exceed the SLAs. And if required, and if you have enough of feedback, we'll be happy to do a whole series on Six Sigma approach to quality in e-commerce in general. Now, very interesting. So one of the great tools that we have implemented, and one of the takeaways from the Six Sigma basket has been the Pareto principle. So let's go back and take a look at history. And here's a quick story. So you had Wilfredo Pareto, um, who was an economist. He lived in Switzerland about 100 years ago, so during the 19th century. And as he was looking at data and making his observations, he discovered that 20% of the population in Switzerland owned 80% of the land. Okay, so that was his observation. And then when you extrapolated that same concept, you figured out that 20% of the population typically owns 80% of the wealth, right? And this observation finally evolved into a principle which is called the Pareto Principle. It is also called the 80-20 rule. What is the 80-20 rule? Uh, it concluded that the difference between the significant few, that is a 20%, and the trivial many, which means the 80%, right? But by itself, it was hardly groundbreaking. So what made the world take notice of Pareto's work was that this pattern was true not only to Switzerland, but to most countries and almost every process. In fact, you could apply an 80-20 rule to yourself to figure out what is 20% of the effort that you can make to achieve 80% of the results that you seek to achieve. So 80% of customers use 20% of an application's capacity. A television is a great example, right? So you buy a television, it has all the features in the world, but of the 10 features, you are probably using 2, which is the on and off button and the volume increase and decrease button, right? So it fits in there as well. 80% of the problems arise from 20% of the projects. Is another extrapolation of this. 80% of the sales come from 20% of clients. That's not a healthy state to be in. Everybody wants a different structure, but if you look at it unilaterally across industries, that is where it comes up to be. Now that we know where the Pareto principle came from and we are introduced to Wilfredo Pareto and the 80-20 rule, let us look at a sample Pareto chart at a category level. So we have on the x-axis, we have different categories of errors that have been identified. So for example, the first one is a category error, which means a categorization error. The second bucket out here is shipping information, pricing, core information, carton information. How is the Pareto built up? So again, going back to school level statistics, you have the frequency of errors for a particular product, right? And you also have a cumulative frequency. So if you use the cumulative frequency, you draw in a line at the 80% level parallel to the x-axis, so which is this particular line, and where it would typically meet the error, the cumulative frequency numbers is you drop a perpendicular and you realize that 80% of your errors have come due to categorization errors or shipping information errors. So which means that now if we are able to focus our trainings or automation or any other aid that can reduce these errors, 80% of our errors have actually come down. So which means that the next buckets which would probably in this scenario become top categories could be pricing and core information, which by itself are very few now. But again, once these are also reduced, you would actually come up with a Six Sigma level kind of a perfection, which is 3.54 defects per million opportunities, right? So that is the whole structure of continuous improvement. So that this slide is a great example of the Pareto principle being deployed in an e-commerce scenario. Again, Pareto principle at a resource level. So we have Lekha, Janvi, Sarvadna, and Onkar, who are resources who have worked on a particular project. And according to the Pareto principle, Lekha has contributed to 80% of the errors. So which means that it is now a focused approach to help Lekha overcome these challenges, train her effectively, help her using the cell structure and get her to improve so that her errors come down, which means the overall error quality, the quality for the whole process moves up. So as we are coming, close to the end of this webinar, till now, let me summarize. We have taken a look at what merchandising operations is all about. We have taken a look at the content journey per se. We have looked at the content journey of a new product. We have quickly visited the enrichment journey for an existing product. Then we talked about the three buckets, right, which are integral to any process, which is people, process, and technology, and our choice of how we make each one of these buckets strong by themselves, and how all the three buckets can work together in tandem, in unison, to ensure a great performing structure, right? At the end of it, with people and process being optimal, right? Technology today, the wrapper of technology is the differentiator that is going to define e-commerce success as we move on, right? And one of the things at the very basic level of technology is quality automation. So how are you able to do optimal quality checks using few resources, using least amount of time, ensuring faster activations and overall reduction of cycle time for a marketplace, right? So aside from some aspects like fact checking, many aspects of quality assurance of content can be automated. And that is a belief and a purpose that we work with. Defining features of a Q automation tool. So there are certain features which are necessary for a QA automation tool to happen. So there are a lot of them out there. There are, commercially off-the-shelf products which are available for Q automation. There are some which have been plugged in using different applications, and there are some that have been created by purpose, so which means which ride off big data, which look at patterns of errors, synthesis of those patterns, usage of artificial intelligence on the machine learning results that have come in from the big data, and again covering that with certain rules so that these levels of automation are applied to the right places, which means as and where applicable, it needs to happen. Now, for a QA automation tool to be successful in today's world, I think the number one requirement is flexibility and adaptability of that product. The tool should be flexible and it should be able to adapt quickly to changing scenarios, changing rules, changing guidelines, because these are changing very fast, because the consumer and end consumer is spending lesser and lesser time, would like to spend lesser time to make his purchase and move on, because everybody is short of time, right? So flexible taxonomy. So the QA tool should be flexible to the changing taxonomy. Hierarchy of categories within the tool should be editable. All rules and validations should be customizable at a leaf level, at a categorization level. It should support an open architecture, so which means that it should have the flexibility to be integrated with larger workflow solutions, with DAMs, etc., with PIMs. It should support API, application protocol interfaces. Different checks can be applied at different attributes within the tool, so it should, the architecture should support that. It should allow conditional checks and references, so which means that when you're checking for one attribute, at the same time, you should be able to check for dependent attributes as well, right? So you should be able to look at attributes as a family and now check around the core. It should have the feature of auto correction, so which means that elimination of double spaces, incorrect capitalizations, etc. Whatever is different, especially the textual part of the information, the formatting part should be auto-corrected. It should give the QA lead, the person who's running the tool, also the ability to manually override certain errors, make a manual decision, or take him straight to the particular SKU which is affected and allow him to make the change right there. So which means that it should overall try to do most things automatically, otherwise provide an option for human intervention. Version control of contents or QA automation tool should be able to look at, at content versions after each round of editing. So which means that each layer of editing should be stored. This will aid decision making later. It is also a great input to the big data that we are trying to collate today to make artificial intelligence stronger tomorrow, right? And then there's a whole change management tracking aspect to it. So like I said, automated QA tool provides formatting checks, text casing, incorrect spacing, incorrect HTML tags, incorrect line, para breaks. It can perform dictionary checks. For example, you're creating a catalog for the US markets where a US dictionary is used, and you are now trying to port the same catalog to a European market where the grammar or the spellings or maybe some syntaxes for that matter are different, right? So how do you use QA automation to look for grammar checks, spelling checks, multiple languages and dialects within the tool itself? So just think about it. If you are working on a catalog and you're shunting between US and English, and if this was manual, then the quantum of errors would have been very high, right? It should also check for blacklist, for blacklisted words, for example, abuse of language, etc. If that comes in somewhere in the, or maybe a word which is not consistent with a brand image, could be a blacklisted word as well. So it should programmatically scrape through the entire content, all the catalogs together, identify the banned words and flag them off for deletion, updation, or removal, right? Consistency checks, so which means duplicate SKUs, for example, checking the parent-child SKU consistency within the taxonomy tree, the mandatory attribute presence, whether it is there or not for that particular SKU. Again, so today, list of values or feature bullets, etc., are great additions to descriptions in a catalog. Syntax and guideline checks are today a huge requirement, and that automated makes the tool a lot stronger. So list of value checks, title attribute lengths, attribute syntax, dimensions checks, units, etc., which would have been a nightmare on a manual front, can be done fairly easily, faster, and with high level of precision with an automated tool. And then, of course, the last bit will be comparisons and references, so which means interdimension arithmetic comparison, feet and inches to centimeters, millimeters kind of checks, conditionally independent attribute checks, etc. So these are certain core features which should be there in a content QA automation tool. And the tool by itself, like we discussed, should be flexible and should be open architected, supporting open architecture for it to evolve with the speed of evolution of the e-commerce market today. So standardized data quality tools often do not fulfill all these requirements. A customized and flexible e-retail solution is the requirement of the industry today. Now that we have the whole catalog created, we have collected a lot of data, data from training of people, from our internal processes to how we are uploading it out. There's a lot of content and data out there, but data is of no good if it isn't utilized. So which means that data needs to be converted into meaningful reports, which are necessary to evaluate the business, to evaluate the process, or to evaluate the whole cataloging journey in a manner that is quantifiable. So good data makes great, aids great decisions. Having the data out there and creating reports is just not enough. This needs to be represented in a way. It should be available real time for people to make quick decisions, and good decisions basis good data, which is in the underlying structure. So interactive dashboards to measure performance are a call of the day, right? So that's the end journey where you're looking at how things are moving. quality, productivity, turnaround time, staffing and resource allocations, training and performance metrics, metrics presented at a task, resource, and team levels in the performing organization are very important. For Excel at Excel, for example, we have adopted Power BI as a dashboard, a dashboarding reporting platform, and that has been hugely beneficial in our internal analysis as well as providing the transparency to our clients. So with that, we have come to the end for this portion of the webinar. Quickly about Ixola. We are a leading e-commerce solutions provider for brands and retailers globally. We are led by a team with over 4 decades of experience. We have assisted over a dozen billion-dollar companies in managing the e-commerce operations worldwide seamlessly. We help brands and retailers realize superior economic performance by transforming their supply chain and retail operations for the digital era. And digital era is what we are